5 years ago, in the heart of a quiet American suburb, a young girl boarded her school bus and never returned home that day. What began as a normal morning soon spiraled into a nightmare that would tear an entire community apart and expose a truth no one wanted to believe. Behind the smile of a trusted bus driver lay a darkness that hid in plain sight, until one mother's courage brought it all to light. Before we dive into this shocking true story of justice, love, and resilience, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal the strength of the human spirit. The morning light poured over Maplewood Lane, washing the quiet suburban street in a golden haze. 8-year-old Amara Collins, with her backpack slightly too big for her small frame, stepped onto the bright yellow school bus for the very first time. Her mother, Danielle, waved from the curb, heart swelling with hope for a new beginning. After years of struggle, this move was supposed to mean safety, better schools, a future that shone a little brighter. But as the bus doors hissed shut, neither of them could have imagined the darkness quietly boarding with her. Behind the wheel sat Mr. Raymond, the longtime driver whose silver hair and easy grin gave him the air of a friendly grandfather. To every parent on the block, he was trustworthy, reliable, someone who had driven generations of children to school. Yet beneath that warm facade was something unsettling, something that didn't quite match the kindness in his eyes. It was the kind of thing that only a mother's instinct could sense long before anyone else dared to see it. Weeks later, those instincts began to claw at Danielle's peace. Her neighbors waved politely, but their smiles felt thin, their eyes a touch too curious. In this mostly white neighborhood, her quiet suspicions about Mr. Raymond were hard to voice without risking the sting of disbelief, or worse, ridicule. What could she even say? That her daughter came home a little too quiet? That something about that man's gaze made her skin crawl? Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that behind those daily bus rides lay a truth far more sinister than anyone could imagine. A warm summer breeze whispered through the leaves of the tall oak tree in front of their modest 2-story house as a moving truck rumbled away. The Collins family, Danielle, her husband Marcus, and little Amara, stood together on their new lawn, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and cut grass. Amara spun in a slow circle, eyes wide with curiosity. "It's different," she said finally. "But I like the tree. Can we hang a swing on it?" Danielle laughed, brushing sweat from her temple. "Maybe once we're all settled in, sweetheart." Marcus walked over, wiping his brow. "That's the last of the boxes," he said, grinning. "What do you say we celebrate with pizza before we collapse?" They laughed, and for a fleeting moment, everything felt perfect. But as they carried the empty boxes inside, Danielle noticed the sideways glances from across the street, curtains shifting, smiles that never reached the eyes. They were the only black family in this neighborhood, maybe in the entire subdivision, and though no one said it aloud, they all felt it. That evening, they sat around a cardboard box that doubled as their dining table, slices of pepperoni pizza in hand. Marcus raised his slice in a mock toast. "To new beginnings," he said. Danielle clinked hers against his with a soft laugh, and even Amara joined in, cheese stringing between bites. For a moment, their laughter filled the half-empty living room, echoing against bare walls and new possibilities. "I can't wait to start designing from home," Danielle said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "No more commuting for me." Marcus smiled, proud and tired. "And I'll handle the city job. It's a drive, but worth it." Amara looked up from her slice, voice small. "Do you think I'll make friends at my new school?" The question lingered like a fragile bubble in the air. Danielle and Marcus exchanged a glance, their smiles faltering just slightly. "Of course you will, sweetheart," Danielle said gently. "You're smart, kind, and funny. The other kids will love you." Marcus nodded, his voice soft but steady. "Just be yourself, baby girl. That's all you ever need to do." As their laughter faded into the hum of cicadas outside, the Collins family couldn't know that their fresh start would soon unravel into something darker. something that would test the limits of their love, their courage, and their faith in the world they thought they knew. The laughter slowly faded, replaced by the soft creaks of their new home settling into the night. The empty rooms no longer echoed with silence, but with the rhythm of a family beginning again. Boxes still lined the walls, but within that clutter lived their dreams of new beginnings, of adventures waiting to be written, of memories they hoped would erase the hardships left behind. Yet beneath the glow of hope, a quiet unease lingered, the kind that comes when you're stepping into unknown territory. This new neighborhood, so picturesque and polished, wasn't exactly built for people like them. Danielle and Marcus had talked about it many times before the move, often late into the night while Amara slept soundly between them. "We're doing this for her," Marcus would remind her. "Better schools, safer streets. She deserves every chance we can give her." Danielle had agreed wholeheartedly then, but now, surrounded by boxes and the faint smell of fresh paint, she couldn't shake the flicker of doubt in her chest. Would they really be accepted here? Would Amara get the chance to simply be a kid, not a symbol, not an outsider? As if sensing her mother's thoughts, Amara climbed onto the couch beside Danielle and rested her small head against her shoulder. "I'm glad we're here together," she said simply, her hand slipping into her mother's. Danielle smiled, her heart melting as she squeezed her daughter's fingers. "Me too, baby," she whispered. "Me too." They spent the rest of the evening unpacking what they needed for the next day. Marcus setting up his suit for his first day at the new firm, Danielle arranging her work desk by the window, and Amara picking out her outfit for school. When night fell, Danielle tucked her daughter into bed, smoothing the curls from her forehead. "Are you excited about tomorrow?" she asked softly. Amara nodded, her eyes wide in the dim glow of the nightlight. "A little nervous too," she admitted. "That's okay," Danielle said, brushing her thumb across Amara's cheek. "It's normal to be nervous about new things, but remember, you're brave, you're strong, and you've got this." Amara's smile spread slowly, her worries dissolving beneath her mother's gentle reassurance. "Thanks, Mom. I love you." Danielle's heart swelled. "I love you too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams." When the door clicked shut, Danielle lingered in the hallway, pressing her back against the wall. For the first time all day, she let her exhaustion catch up to her. She wanted so badly for this move to be the start of something beautiful, especially for Amara. In their bedroom, Marcus was already under the covers, phone in hand, studying his new route to work. "Checking it again?" Danielle teased, climbing in beside him. He chuckled, "Just making sure I don't get lost on day one." His laugh faded as he turned to her. "How's Amara feeling?" "Nervous, but excited," Danielle said. "I think she'll be okay." Marcus wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "And you?" She exhaled, sinking into his warmth. "The same," she admitted quietly. "Nervous, but excited. I just hope we made the right choice." Marcus kissed her forehead. "We did," he said with quiet conviction. "It might not be easy at first, but we're together, and as long as we've got that, we'll handle anything." Outside, the night settled deep over Maplewood Lane. Inside, two parents held onto each other, hopeful, uncertain, but united, unaware that this calm would soon be shattered by truths waiting just beyond tomorrow's sunrise. The house groaned softly in the dark, its old wooden beams settling as if acknowledging the new lives within. Outside, the sky stretched wide and endless, sprinkled with stars that shimmered over Maplewood Lane, whispering silent promises of fresh beginnings. Inside, Danielle and Marcus drifted to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, unaware that their peaceful dreams would soon give way to questions they never expected to ask. By dawn, the quiet hum of morning filled the Collins home, the soft clatter of dishes, the shuffle of shoes by the door, and the nervous excitement of a first day. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, painting golden lines across the driveway where Amara stood clutching her brand new backpack. "You've got your lunch?" Danielle asked for what felt like the 10th time. brushing invisible dust from her daughter's sleeve. Amara nodded, patting her bag. "And my notebooks, pencils, and crayons," she added with a grin. Marcus knelt beside her, meeting her at eye level. "Remember what we talked about, champ?" he asked, his tone gentle but firm. Amara straightened up, reciting carefully, "Be myself, be kind, and if anything makes me uncomfortable, tell a teacher or you and Mom right away." Marcus smiled, pride softening his features. "That's my girl." Then came the distant rumble, the unmistakable growl of a diesel engine rounding the corner. Danielle's heart quickened. This was it, the moment they'd been both waiting for and dreading. The yellow school bus slowed to a stop, its brakes sighing. The driver, a man with thinning gray hair and a pressed uniform, leaned toward the open door. His name tag gleamed, Raymond. "Morning," he said politely, though his tone carried no warmth. "You must be new to the route?" Danielle forced a smile, fighting the sudden knot in her stomach. "Yes, we just moved in. This is Amara. She'll be riding with you." Raymond gave a curt nod. "Welcome aboard, Amara." Amara hesitated, glancing back at her parents. Danielle gave her a small nod of encouragement. Marcus whispered, "You've got this, sweetheart." Taking a deep breath, Amara climbed the steps and disappeared into the bus. Through the window, Danielle caught glimpses of curious faces, some smiling, others whispering behind raised hands. A few expressions, though, carried something else, something that made her chest tighten. As the bus pulled away, Marcus slipped his hand into hers. "She'll be fine," he said with quiet confidence, though the flicker of uncertainty in his voice matched the unease in Danielle's chest. The day crawled by. Danielle tried to distract herself by organizing her home office, but her thoughts kept wandering back to Amara. Was she making friends? Did her teacher seem kind? Was she feeling out of place? Every sound from outside made her glance toward the window, waiting for the familiar engine hum that would signal the end of the school day. When it finally came, her heart leaped. She hurried to the door just as Amara came bounding down the steps, her curls bouncing, her face flushed with excitement. "Hi, Mom," she called, running up the driveway. "Hey, sweetheart." Danielle enveloped her in a hug. "How was your first day?" "It was great," Amara said between giggles. "My teacher's really nice. I sat with a girl named Jenna at lunch and we played tag at recess." Relief flooded Danielle's chest. For the first time all day, her heart felt light again. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Marcus home from his first day at the firm, their laughter filled the room. Amara animatedly described her day, waving her hands and talking through mouthfuls of macaroni. But as the story slowed, she suddenly frowned. "Our bus driver's kinda rude," she said quietly. Danielle and Marcus exchanged quick glances. "What do you mean, honey?" Danielle asked gently. Amara shrugged, eyes flicking down to her plate. "He just says mean things sometimes," she mumbled. Then, almost too quickly, she changed the subject. "Dad, did you meet anyone cool at your new office?" Marcus smiled, playing along, though his eyes met Danielle's across the table. A silent exchange of worry neither dared to voice. Later that night, when the house was dark and still, Marcus leaned against the headboard, scrolling through his phone. "What do you think she meant?" he asked quietly. "About the bus driver being rude?" Danielle turned to face him, her heart already uneasy. Somewhere deep down, she knew this was the start of something, a shift, subtle but unmistakable, in the perfect picture they had painted of their new life. "The bus driver," Marcus repeated, his voice heavy with concern as he set his phone aside. Danielle sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed, her fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. "I don't know," she murmured. "Maybe it's nothing. Maybe he's just gruff." She hesitated, her voice lowering. But it could be something," Marcus finished quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the ceiling fan the only sound between them. "Should we ask her more about it?" he asked finally. Danielle shook her head. "Not yet. Let's give it a few days, see if she brings it up again." I don't want to make her anxious if it's nothing." Marcus nodded, though the lines on his forehead deepened. They both felt it, that quiet, unshakable sense that something wasn't right, even if they couldn't name it. When the lights went out, Danielle lay awake staring at the ceiling, Amara's words echoing in her mind. "He just says mean things sometimes. What kind of things, and why?" The questions turned over and over in her head, keeping sleep just out of reach until dawn bled into the edges of the curtains. Over the next few weeks, life in the Collins household settled into an easy rhythm, or at least it looked that way from the outside. Marcus left early each morning for his commute into the city, while Danielle worked from her home office, filling the rooms with the steady tap of her keyboard. Every afternoon, the school bus groaned to a stop in front of their house, its doors opening with a familiar hiss as Amara stepped off, her backpack slung low on her shoulders. It all looked so ordinary, yet beneath the calm, Danielle felt something quietly unraveling. Amara was changing. The bubbly, talkative little girl who used to fill the kitchen with stories now gave short, distracted answers when asked about her day. The sparkle in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a faraway look that Danielle didn't recognize. One afternoon, Danielle stepped away from her computer to grab a coffee and found Amara sitting by the living room window, knees drawn to her chest, staring out at the street. "Hey, sweetheart," Danielle said softly. "Everything okay?" Amara startled slightly, blinking as if pulled from somewhere far away. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Danielle sat beside her, gently brushing a curl away from her face. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you, school, friends, anything at all." She trailed off, hoping her daughter would fill the silence. But Amara only nodded and leaned against her shoulder, quiet and small. That evening, while Marcus worked late, Danielle decided to try again. She joined Amara on the couch as the TV flickered softly in the background. "How was school today?" she asked casually. "It was fine," came the usual short reply. Danielle hesitated, then gently ventured, "Do you remember when you mentioned that the bus driver sometimes says mean things? Has anything like that happened again?" Amara froze. Her fingers tightened around the hem of her shirt. "It's nothing, Mommy," she said quickly, her voice trembling just slightly. Danielle's chest tightened. She could see her daughter's eyes dart toward the window, scanning the room, as if afraid someone might be listening. "Amara, look at me," Danielle said softly, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. "You can tell me anything. If someone's being mean to you, or if something's scaring you, I need to know, sweetheart. I'm here to help you." For a moment, it seemed like Amara might speak. Her lower lip quivered, her eyes glistening with tears she fought to hold back. But just as quickly, she turned away, forcing a weak smile. "I'm fine, Mom. Really. Can I go to my room?" Danielle nodded, her throat tight as she watched Amara disappear down the hallway. The house felt heavier somehow, the silence thicker. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. But until her daughter trusted her enough to say the words out loud, Danielle could only wait and pray she wasn't already too late. Danielle's voice softened, her hand resting on Amara's cheek. "Whatever it is, sweetheart, I want to know. I'm here to help you." For a moment, Amara's walls began to crack. Her lower lip trembled, and tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. Danielle's heart thudded as she waited, afraid even to breathe. But then, just as quickly, the moment passed. Amara blinked the tears away, forcing a small, practiced smile. "I'm fine, Mom. Really? Can I go play in my room now?" Danielle nodded, masking her worry behind a faint smile. "Of course, baby." She watched her daughter hurry down the hallway, her small shoulders tense and hurried, like she was running from something unseen. The ache in Danielle's chest deepened. Something was definitely wrong, but she couldn't figure out what. When Marcus came home that evening, smelling faintly of city air and exhaustion, Danielle tried again to share what had been gnawing at her all day. As they prepared dinner together, she recounted Amara's strange behavior. The quiet stares, the sudden shifts, the fear behind her eyes. "I don't know what's happening," she admitted, her voice trembling, "but I can feel something isn't right." Marcus stirred the pot of pasta sauce, his brow furrowed. When she finished, he sighed heavily, setting the spoon down with a clatter. "Danny, I think you're reading too much into it," he said, his tone weary. "She's just adjusting. It's a big change for all of us." A spark of frustration flared in Danielle's chest. "But you haven't seen how she's acting. She's not herself, Marcus. I really think—" "I've got enough on my plate at work," he cut in, his voice sharper than he intended. "Please, don't turn this into something it's not. Lisa's fine. Just let it go." The kitchen fell silent except for the slow bubbling of the sauce. Danielle turned away, her chest tightening with hurt and anger. She felt unseen, alone in her own home, surrounded by the quiet hum of denial. Marcus glanced at her, regret flickering across his face, but he couldn't find the right words to undo the sting. They finished dinner without speaking. When Amara joined them at the table, the tension hung heavy in the air. She looked between her parents, confusion clouding her small face. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Marcus said quickly, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How was school?" Amara's answer came in short, carefully chosen phrases. Safe, neutral, unremarkable. Danielle pushed her food around her plate, her appetite gone. Across the table, Marcus offered her a quiet, apologetic glance, but she couldn't bring herself to look back. That night, they lay in bed with their backs turned to each other. The silence was louder than any argument. Danielle stared into the dark, replaying Amara's words, her tone, her darting eyes. "He just says mean things sometimes." What did that really mean? What kind of mean? Her instincts screamed at her, but Marcus's dismissal echoed louder in her mind. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm overreacting? And yet, the dread in her chest wouldn't fade. It sat there like a weight, heavy and unrelenting. As dawn crept through the curtains, Danielle made a silent promise. If no one else would take her seriously, not even her husband, she would find out the truth herself. The next morning broke gray and restless, the air thick with mist. Marcus had already left for work, the distance between them still hanging in the air. Danielle went through the motions of packing Amara's lunch, smoothing her daughter's hair, forcing small talk that barely held. As the yellow bus pulled up to the curb, Danielle's pulse quickened. She watched Amara climb the steps, watched Mr. Raymond's polite but distant nod. Then, as the doors closed and the engine roared to life, something hardened inside her. Today would be different. Today, she would stop wondering. Today, she would follow that bus and uncover what was really happening behind those yellow doors. The second the bus turned the corner and disappeared from sight, Danielle's patience snapped into motion. She grabbed her car keys and a light jacket, her pulse hammering in her chest. Locking the door behind her, she slid into the driver's seat and took a shaky breath before turning the key. The hum of the engine felt louder than usual, or maybe that was her heart. As she pulled out of the driveway, she caught sight of her neighbor, Mrs. Harrington, watering her lawn across the street. The woman waved, the way people in polite neighborhoods do when they're watching. Danielle forced a smile and waved back, pretending everything was fine, pretending she wasn't about to follow a school bus through the suburbs like a detective in a bad thriller. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. She kept a cautious distance, trailing the yellow bus as it wound through Maplewood's tree-lined streets. Her thoughts flipped back and forth like static. What if Marcus was right? What if I'm being ridiculous? But then, the other side of her whispered louder. What if he's wrong? What if Amara's really in trouble? At each stop, Danielle noticed something strange. No matter how many children waited, Amara was always the last to board. Even when other kids stood beside her, they climbed on first. Once, Danielle thought she saw the driver, Mr. Raymond, lean toward her daughter and say something as Amara stepped up. From her car, she couldn't make out the words, but she saw Amara's shoulders tense, her body shrinking slightly before she disappeared inside. By the time the bus reached the school, Danielle's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. She parked across the street and watched, her eyes locked on the yellow vehicle like it might spill its secrets if she just stared hard enough. One by one, the kids filed off, laughing and chattering. Mr. Raymond stood at the door, smiling and helping them down, all friendly professionalism. When Amara reached him, he gave her a pat on the shoulder, casual, harmless, maybe even kind. Danielle's chest tightened with confusion. From where she sat, he looked like the picture of decency, polite, careful, gentle even. So why did Amara seem so afraid of him? Why did her gut twist every time she thought about his smile? Driving home, she tried to rationalize what she'd seen. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe her daughter was just shy, still finding her place. But that feeling, that sharp, quiet knowing, refused to fade. What if he saw me? She thought suddenly. What if he knew I was following? The idea sent a shiver down her spine. Back at home, she tried to lose herself in work, but her focus fractured again and again. Every email, every design draft dissolved into the same looping thoughts. The way Amara tensed, the driver's hand on her shoulder, the way everyone else seemed to look away. She was missing something. She could feel it, a piece of the puzzle that refused to reveal itself. When the afternoon rolled around, Danielle made herself smile as Amara walked through the front door. "Hey, sweetheart," she greeted, keeping her tone light. "How was school?" Amara shrugged, her usual answer. "Fine," she mumbled, already heading toward her room. Danielle watched her go, the ache in her chest growing heavier. Something was eating away at her little girl, and she didn't know how to reach her. That night during dinner, she studied Amara quietly. The girl pushed food around her plate without eating, her eyes downcast. When Marcus asked about her day, she answered politely but distantly, like a child reading from a script. Danielle's heart broke at the sight. After dinner, as Marcus washed the dishes, Danielle approached her daughter on the couch. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "Want to watch a movie with me?" Amara hesitated, then nodded. Danielle wrapped an arm around her as the screen flickered to life, bathing them both in the cool light of the television. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The sound of dialogue filled the room, but Danielle barely heard it. "You know I love you, right?" she whispered suddenly. Amara looked up, startled, her wide brown eyes reflecting the glow of the TV. "I know, Mom," she said quietly. "I love you too." Danielle hugged her tighter, pressing her cheek to her daughter's hair. "And you know you can tell me anything, anything at all, and I'll believe you, always." Amara's body tensed for just a second before she relaxed again, her head resting against Danielle's shoulder. "I know," she murmured, but something in her voice, soft, cautious, rehearsed, told Danielle that her daughter didn't quite believe it. And as the movie played on, Danielle's resolve hardened. Whatever was happening, whatever secret her little girl was too afraid to tell, she was going to uncover it, no matter what it took. "You can tell me anything," Danielle whispered, her voice barely rising above the hum of the TV. "Anything at all." For the briefest moment, something flickered in Amara's eyes, a flash of fear, sadness, maybe even shame. But then, just as quickly, it vanished. She turned away, forcing a small, practiced smile. "I know, Mom," she said lightly, shifting her gaze back to the screen. Danielle exhaled softly, her heart aching. She hadn't broken through, not yet, but she would. Something was wrong, and no amount of reassurance or routine would convince her otherwise. As Amara's breathing slowed and her small body relaxed into sleep against her, Danielle made a silent promise. No matter what it took, with or without Marcus's support, She would uncover the truth about what was happening with that bus driver. Little did she know, the truth would be far darker than she ever imagined. A truth that would shatter their peace and force them to confront the ugly realities buried beneath their picture-perfect neighborhood. The following afternoon, Danielle sat alone on a park bench, absently watching Amara pump her legs on the swings, her laughter carried away by the crisp autumn air. The world looked deceptively ordinary. Golden leaves falling, parents chatting, the sound of a distant lawnmower. But inside Danielle's mind, questions churned like storm clouds. She replayed every small detail of the past week, the driver's polite smile, Amara's tense shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact. She needed answers. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" The voice pulled her from her thoughts. Danielle looked up to see a woman she recognized from down the street, mid-40s, manicured, a pearl necklace glinting at her collarbone. She smiled warmly, gesturing to the empty space beside Danielle. "Mind if I sit?" "Of course not," Danielle said, forcing a polite smile. "I'm Karen," the woman said cheerfully, extending her hand. "We live a few houses down." "Danielle," she replied, shaking her hand. "Nice to meet you properly." They exchanged small talk, the move, the neighborhood, the challenges of settling in. For a moment, Danielle let herself relax. It felt good to have a friendly face nearby, even if only for a moment. But the weight of her worry pressed too hard to stay quiet. Gathering her courage, she finally asked, "Karen, can I ask you something?" "It's about the school bus driver, Mr. Raymond." Karen's polite expression faltered. "What about him?" Danielle hesitated. "My daughter mentioned that he says unkind things sometimes. I've just been wondering if you've ever heard anything like that from other parents." The change was instant, like a switch flipping. Karen's smile vanished, her posture stiffening. Her eyes hardened as her voice dropped, sharp and venomous. "How dare you accuse Mr. Raymond of anything?" she snapped. "He's been driving kids here for over 20 years. He's a good man." Danielle blinked, stunned by the sudden hostility. I wasn't accusing anyone. You just what?" Karen's voice rose, her face flushed. "You just moved here and think you can start spreading rumors? Maybe if you and your family spent less time looking for problems and more time fitting in." Danielle's stomach twisted. The subtext wasn't hidden. It was loud, clear, and cruel. She rose on unsteady legs, her heart pounding. "I didn't mean to offend you," she managed. "I'm just trying to make sure my daughter's safe." Karen stood too, her expression cold as ice. "Maybe teach your daughter to respect people who've earned it, instead of making up stories. And if you don't like it here," she sneered, "you know where the freeway is." With that, she turned sharply and stalked off, her heels clicking against the pavement. Danielle stood frozen, the blood roaring in her ears. Across the playground, Amara had stopped swinging, her small hands gripping the chains, watching her mother with wide, uncertain eyes. Forcing a smile she didn't feel, Danielle waved. "Time to go, sweetheart." As they walked home, Amara slipped her hand into her mother's. Danielle's smile stayed fixed, but inside her thoughts were a whirlwind. Karen's reaction had been too extreme, too defensive. Was this how everyone in the neighborhood felt about them? That they didn't belong? If a simple question could provoke such venom, what would happen if Amara ever spoke up herself? That night, after putting Amara to bed, Danielle sat alone in the living room, the quiet pressing in like fog. She didn't tell Marcus about the encounter. She couldn't bear to hear "I told you so" or feel his distance again. But one thing had become clear. She wasn't imagining things. Something dark was hiding beneath this town's manicured lawns and polite smiles. She made up her mind. She would keep watching, listening, gathering proof until she had something no one could dismiss. And when she did, she would confront every single person who stood between her daughter and the truth. What Danielle didn't know was that the events she had just set in motion, with one question, one neighbor, one spark, would ignite a fire that would tear through the fragile piece of maple wood and expose the kind of truth that could never again be buried. The tension that had hung over Danielle for weeks seemed at last to lift. Amara was smiling again, talking about her teachers, her classmates, even a new friend she'd made named Zoe. For the first time in months, laughter drifted freely through the house, and Danielle dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong. Maybe the dark cloud she'd felt hovering wasn't danger at all, but the growing pains of a new beginning. That thought brought both relief and guilt. Had she been so wrapped in fear that she nearly tore their lives apart over nothing? On a crisp November afternoon, sunlight spilled across her desk as she worked intently on a new design project. The house was quiet, peaceful, broken only by the gentle tap of her keyboard and the sound of leaves scraping against the windowsill. When she finally looked at the clock, her heart gave a small start. It was almost time for the bus. Smiling, she saved her work and walked to the kitchen, humming as she sliced apples and spread peanut butter on crackers, their little after-school ritual. 4 o'clock came and went. Danielle didn't worry. The bus was often late. She arranged the snack neatly on a plate, glanced out the front window, and returned to her office to send one last email. But by 4:15, her stomach began to tighten. Still no bus. By 4:30, she was pacing the living room, her pulse drumming in her ears. She grabbed her phone and called Marcus, trying to keep her voice steady. "Lisa's not home yet," she said, catching herself. "I mean, Amara. The bus didn't come. Maybe it's late, or..." Marcus's voice was calm but clipped. "I'm leaving work now. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Call the school, see if they know anything." Danielle nodded automatically, even though he couldn't see her. "Right, okay, I'll do that." She hung up and dialed the school. Her voice trembled as she spoke to the receptionist, explaining that her daughter hadn't come home. The woman's tone was polite but weary. All the buses had returned to the depot, she said, and the staff were closing for the day. "But my daughter isn't home," Danielle said, her voice cracking. "She left school this afternoon. She has to be somewhere between there and here. Please, can't you check something?" "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Williams," came the answer. "If she doesn't show up soon, you should call the police." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Danielle's hands shook as she lowered the phone. The police. How had a normal afternoon turned into this? By the time Marcus burst through the front door, she was trembling, her face streaked with tears, the uneaten snack still sitting on the counter. "She's gone, Marcus," she sobbed. "She's gone, and it's my fault. I knew something was wrong." Marcus pulled her into his arms. "No," he said firmly, though his voice cracked. "We'll find her. She's out there somewhere. We'll find her." They clung to each other as the seconds ticked by, the sound of the clock echoing through the house like a cruel countdown. Danielle's mind raced with horrifying possibilities. Car accidents, strangers, that bus driver. Her heart felt as though it was being torn apart. Then, a sound. The soft creak of the front door. Time seemed to stop. They turned toward the entryway, and there she was, Amara. Her yellow skirt wrinkled, pink shirt askew, braids messy and uneven. She looked so small, standing there in the fading light. Danielle ran to her, gathering her daughter into her arms with a sob. "Where have you been?" she cried, relief and terror colliding in her voice. "We were so worried." Marcus joined them, wrapping them both in his arms. For a fleeting moment, the world stilled. They were together again, safe. But when Danielle pulled back, her breath caught. Amara's face was pale, her eyes wide and glossy, tears trembling at the edge. She was shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper. "Sweetheart," Danielle whispered, cupping her daughter's cheeks. "What happened? Where were you?" Amara swallowed hard, her lower lip quivering. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a breath. "The bus driver. He did it again." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Marcus froze, the color draining from his face. Danielle's vision blurred as the meaning sank in, every fear she'd buried erupting all at once. In that single, shattering moment, the fragile illusion of safety that had held their lives together crumbled, leaving only the terrible, undeniable truth. In that moment, every fear Danielle had ever pushed aside came roaring back. Every instinct, every sleepless night, every whisper of doubt she'd tried to silence. It all converged into one gut-wrenching realization. She had been right all along. Something was terribly, unforgivably wrong. Marcus and Danielle exchanged a horrified glance, the air between them heavy with dread. They guided Amara to the couch, sitting close on either side as if their bodies alone could shield her from whatever darkness had found her. Marcus took her hand gently, his thumb tracing small circles across her skin, while Danielle rubbed her back in slow, soothing motions. "Sweetheart," Danielle said softly, her voice trembling but steady. "We need you to tell us everything. What do you mean when you said the bus driver did it again? What's been happening?" Amara's lip quivered. Her small fingers twisted together in her lap as she avoided their eyes. Then, with a deep breath that seemed far too heavy for her young chest, she began to speak. "Mr. Raymond, he doesn't like me," she whispered. "He doesn't like people like us." The words landed like blows. Marcus and Danielle exchanged a pained, knowing look, the kind that said everything without a word, the kind that asked, how could this still be happening? Amara's voice wavered, but she kept going. "He says things, little things, like when I get on the bus, he'll say, 'Didn't think they let folks like you live around here.' Or he tells the other kids not to sit next to me. Sometimes he laughs when they tease me." Her chin trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "When I told you he was rude before, I didn't know how to say it. I thought maybe I was just imagining it." Danielle's chest tightened. The guilt hit her all at once. The hesitation, the waiting, the desperate hope that maybe it was all in her head. She had failed to protect her daughter. But then Amara's voice dropped to a whisper so soft, Danielle had to lean into. "Here." "This wasn't the first time he left me," she said. "He did it before, a few weeks ago. He stopped the bus early and told me to get off. Said if I told anyone, I'd regret it. Said no one would believe me. Not with my skin." Danielle froze, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it echo in her ears. "He what?" she breathed. Amara's voice cracked. "Today, he did it again. He pulled over and told me to get off. I didn't know where I was. I just walked until I saw a gas station, and then I found my way home." For a moment, no one spoke. The air felt thick, suffocating. Marcus stood abruptly, his jaw clenched, pacing the room as if trying to contain the rage that trembled through his body. Danielle pulled Amara into her arms, rocking her gently, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "You're safe now. You're home. None of this is your fault." "I'm sorry," Amara sobbed. "I didn't tell you sooner." Marcus knelt in front of her, his eyes wet. "You have nothing to be sorry for," he said firmly. "What he did was wrong. He hurt you, and we're going to make sure he never hurts another kid again. I promise." Amara nodded, exhausted, her tiny body trembling as if she'd carried the weight of this secret for far too long. Danielle looked at Marcus, her voice barely a whisper. "We're calling the police." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Right now." Amara's eyes widened in fear. "What if they don't believe me? He said they wouldn't. He said they'd take his side." Danielle cupped her daughter's face and met her eyes, fierce and unwavering. "We believe you, and we'll make sure they believe you too. You are not alone, sweetheart. Not ever again." As Marcus reached for the phone and dialed 911, Danielle's heart pounded with a mix of fear and resolve. She thought about the neighbor's cold stares, about Karen's venom at the park, about how easily this community protected its own. But she didn't care anymore. Whatever came next, she would face it. Together, they would fight. Minutes later, the shrill doorbell sliced through the silence. Marcus took a deep breath and opened the door. Two officers stood on the porch, a tall white man with kind but wary eyes, and a younger black woman with a quiet confidence in her stance. "Good evening, sir," the male officer said. "I'm Officer Jensen, and this is my partner, Officer Brooks. We received a call about a missing child." Marcus nodded quickly, stepping aside. "That was us, but she's home now. Still, we need to talk. There's something else going on. Something serious." The officers exchanged a glance before stepping inside. Danielle held Amara's hand tightly, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't know what the night would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about her daughter anymore. It was about every child who'd ever been silenced, every parent who'd ever been told they were imagining things. And Danielle Williams was done being silent. As Marcus led the officers into the living room, Danielle rose from the couch, her arms still wrapped protectively around Amara. The young officer, a black woman with kind, steady eyes, immediately knelt to Amara's level. "Hey there," she said gently, her tone warm and reassuring. "You must be Amara. I'm Officer Brooks. I'm really glad you're safe. Is it okay if we ask you and your parents a few questions about what happened today?" Amara hesitated, clutching her mother's hand tightly, but finally nodded. Over the next hour, the family recounted everything: the missing hours, the confrontation, the cruel words, the earlier incidents. Danielle spoke through tears, Marcus through clenched teeth. Amara's small, trembling voice filled in the rest. Officer Jensen, the older white officer, scribbled notes in a small pad, his face unreadable. When Amara's story ended, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Finally, Jensen cleared his throat. "That's quite an accusation," he said slowly, his tone cautious. "Mr. Raymond has been a respected part of this community for years." Danielle's composure snapped. "Are you saying you don't believe her?" she demanded, her voice sharp and trembling. Before the tension could deepen, Officer Brooks interjected calmly. "What my partner means is that we take this kind of report very seriously. We just need to investigate carefully, step by step." Marcus, who had stayed silent for most of the interview, finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "You'd better, because our daughter is terrified, and this man is still out there driving kids to school." Officer Jensen nodded, though his jaw was tight. "We'll need to speak with Mr. Raymond and check for corroborating witnesses. Has anyone else seen or heard anything?" Amara shook her head, tears forming again. "He always makes me the last one on the bus," she whispered. Danielle's heart ached at the words. How long had this been happening right under their noses? How many times had their little girl been alone, scared, unheard? As the officers prepared to leave, Danielle suddenly stood. "We're coming with you," she said firmly. "When you talk to him, we need to be there." Officer Jensen frowned. "Ma'am, that's not standard protocol." "I don't care about protocol," Danielle cut in, her voice rising. "That man threatened my daughter. I'm not sitting here waiting for a phone call." After a pause, Officer Brooks nodded. "All right, you can come, but you'll need to wait in the car while we speak with him." The drive through Maplewood was silent, the tension in the car thick enough to suffocate. The golden light of dusk painted the neighborhood in deceptive calm. Trimmed lawns, mailboxes, kids on bicycles, all of it hiding, something rotten underneath. When they pulled up to a modest two-story home just a few streets away, Danielle's stomach twisted. She had passed this house before, smiled at its flower beds, waved to its owner. Now it felt like a facade, too normal, too neat for what it concealed. "Stay here," Officer Brooks said gently. "We'll handle this." Through the windshield, Danielle and Marcus watched as the officers approached the door. Mr. Raymond answered, confusion flickering across his face, quickly replaced by guarded defensiveness. His gestures grew animated, his face red, as Jensen spoke. Then he shook his head sharply and stepped back inside. When the officers returned several minutes later, Jensen's expression was grim. "He denies everything," he said flatly. "Claims he's never mistreated any child." Danielle's chest constricted. "So that's it? He just says it didn't happen, and you believe him?" Before Jensen could respond, a shout came from across the street. "Wait!" They turned to see a woman hurrying toward them, waving frantically. Danielle squinted. She recognized her immediately. It was Carmen, one of the only other black mothers in the neighborhood. "I'm sorry," Carmen panted as she reached them. "I couldn't help overhearing, but that woman, she's right. My 2 kids. They went through something similar with him. We never reported it because we didn't think anyone would believe us. We just started driving them ourselves." The air shifted instantly. Officer Jensen's skeptical expression softened, replaced by something graver. Officer Brooks's eyes narrowed with quiet resolve. "Ma'am," Brooks said, her voice firm but kind, "we'll need you to give an official statement. What you're saying could be very important." Carmen nodded, glancing briefly at Danielle. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. The understanding of mothers who had both lived with fear and silence too long. As more squad cars arrived, the quiet suburban street transformed into a scene of flashing lights and murmured voices. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, their perfect facades cracking under the weight of truth. Danielle held Amara close, her heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and vindication. For the first time since moving to Maplewood, she didn't feel invisible. She felt heard. And as she watched Officer Brooks take Carmen's statement, Danielle knew this was only the beginning. What started with one frightened little girl's whisper was about to shake an entire community and force it to face the darkness it had long chosen to ignore. By the next morning, the quiet streets of Maplewood were anything but ordinary. Blue and red lights painted the manicured lawns as Mr. Raymond was led out of his house in handcuffs. Danielle stood on her porch, the cool dawn air biting against her skin, watching in stunned silence. For weeks, she had imagined this moment, but the reality of it hit harder than she'd expected. Relief washed through her like a tide, followed by a heavy, aching sadness. Marcus joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "It's over," he said softly. Danielle shook her head, her gaze still fixed on the flashing lights. "No," she murmured. "It's just beginning. We've got a lot of work to do to make sure this never happens again. Not to Amara, not to any child." Inside, their daughter slept soundly for the first time in days, her breathing steady, her small hands tucked beneath her cheek. Watching her, Danielle felt a surge of determination. They had fought to protect her, but now they would fight for every family that had ever been silenced. In the days that followed, the Williams family found themselves thrust into the center of a storm. What began as a neighborhood secret had exploded into a national conversation. More families came forward, parents with trembling voices, children who finally dared to speak up. The truth spread like wildfire, and the story took on a life of its own. Reporters camped out on the Williams front lawn. Headlines screamed from every screen. Bus driver accused of racist abuse, suburban town in uproar. But to Danielle, it was more than a headline. It was their pain, flattened into sound bites for the evening news. "Mom?" Amara's small voice pulled her from the window. "Are those people going to stay out there all day?" Danielle turned, forcing a calm smile. "They'll leave soon, sweetheart. Don't worry about them." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. The media circus had brought attention, yes, but also judgment, gossip, and tension. Their once quiet street now buzzed with divided whispers. Marcus entered, his face tired, phone still in hand. "I just spoke with a lawyer," he said quietly. "The DA's moving forward with the case. They want Amara to testify." The words sank like a stone. Danielle's throat tightened. The thought of her little girl sitting in a courtroom, reliving the nightmare, was almost too much to bear. But justice demanded truth, even when it hurt. "We'll handle it," Danielle said finally, pulling Amara close. "One step at a time. For now, let's focus on helping her feel safe again." Healing, however, proved harder than either of them imagined, not just for their family, but for Maplewood itself. As the investigation widened, more stories surfaced, stories that echoed Amara's. Families who had stayed silent out of fear, who had endured the same cruelty and told themselves it was better to move on. The school board called an emergency meeting. The auditorium buzzed with tension, parents arguing, emotions running high. "We need stricter screening for school employees," one man demanded. "This is one isolated case," another countered. "We can't burn down the whole system over one bad apple." Danielle rose slowly, her voice cutting through the noise. "This isn't about one man," she said, steady and clear. "This is about what let him get away with it. The silence, the excuses, the belief that some families don't belong here. If we want our children to be safe, we have to build a community that sees them, all of them." The room fell quiet. For the first time since that awful day, people seemed to listen. In the weeks that followed, change began to take root. A coalition of parents, black, white, and brown, formed a diversity and inclusion committee. They pushed for cultural awareness training, diverse hiring, and a better reporting system to ensure no voice went unheard again. At home, Danielle and Marcus focused on rebuilding the small, quiet world they'd nearly lost. They found a counselor who helped Amara talk about her fear without reliving it. Slowly, color returned to her drawings. Her laughter came back. Cautious at first, then brighter. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the cicadas began to hum, Danielle stood on the porch again, watching Amara chase fireflies across the yard. The neighborhood around them was still divided, still healing, but something had changed. Not just outside, but inside her too. Because courage, she realized, didn't always come with victory. Sometimes, it began with one terrified voice choosing to speak, and a mother choosing to believe. And for Danielle Williams, that was enough to keep fighting, not out of anger, but out of love. For her daughter, for her community, for a future that would finally be safe for every child who dared to dream. Over the following months, the Williams family poured their energy into healing. Danielle and Marcus found a therapist who specialized in helping children process racial trauma, someone who understood the silent weight Amara had been carrying. Progress came in small, fragile steps, a longer smile, a lighter laugh, the slow return of color to her drawings. Each one was a victory. One quiet afternoon, as Danielle was helping Amara with her math homework, a soft knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find a familiar face, Karen, the neighbor who had once spat venom at her in the park. Karen's eyes were downcast, her voice trembling. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I was wrong to dismiss you. I didn't want to believe something like that could happen here. I'm so sorry for how I treated you." For a long moment, Danielle said nothing. The memory of that day, the anger, the humiliation, flashed through her mind. Part of her wanted to close the door, to turn away. But then she thought of Amara, of the world she wanted her daughter to inherit, one built not on anger, but on understanding. "Thank you," Danielle said quietly. "That means a lot." It was a small moment, but a powerful one. And it wasn't the last. As winter melted into spring, the town of Maplewood began to change. The school district introduced new safety policies, cameras on all buses, background checks for drivers, and a confidential reporting system for students and parents. Conversations that had once been whispered were now happening out loud, in meetings, classrooms, and living rooms. The walls of silence were finally cracking. When the trial came, it was long and difficult. Danielle and Marcus sat in the courtroom as family after family spoke, each story echoing their own pain. When the verdict was read, the room was heavy with both sorrow and relief. Guilty on all counts. Outside the courthouse, Danielle knelt and pulled Amara into her arms. "You did it, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking with pride. "You were brave, and you helped make sure he can never hurt anyone else." Amara looked up, her small smile shining through tears. "We did it, Mom. All of us." Months later, the neighborhood began to bloom again. Not just with flowers, but with something deeper. Connection. awareness, hope. On a bright April morning, Danielle stood on her porch, the sun warming her face as she watched Amara climb the steps of the school bus. The new driver, a woman with warm brown eyes and a kind smile, greeted each child by name. Amara turned, waving before taking her seat beside a group of friends who looked like every shade of Maplewood's future. Danielle waved back, her heart full. They had walked through the darkest part of their lives, and somehow they had found the light. Their story had sparked change, not just in their home, but across an entire community. As the bus disappeared down the street, Danielle drew in a deep breath of spring air. The work wasn't over. It never would be. But for now, there was peace. Peace and hope. Hope for Amara. Hope for their family. And hope for a future where every child, no matter their color, no matter their story, could step onto that yellow bus and know they belonged. Thank you for being part of this journey of courage and transformation. If this story moved you as much as it did us, don't miss the next one. A tale of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable strength of family. Click here to continue the journey.